Most people today feel a quiet fear they never talk about. The fear that something fundamental about love is breaking, not just in their own lives, but everywhere. You see it in the way relationships start fast, but dissolve in a way that no one can fully explain. You see it in the rising loneliness, the constant second guessing, the endless search for someone who finally feels right, even though that feeling never seems to last. You see it when couples who genuinely love each other still end up drifting apart, confused, ashamed, unable to articulate what went wrong. And if you are honest, you probably feel it too. That subtle anxiety that love has become fragile, unstable, or almost impossible to sustain. But what if the real problem is not that people is getting worse at relationships? What if the real problem is that the world around us has changed in ways our minds and body were never prepared for? In the last years, there has been a shift so deep that is reshaping how we attach, how we commit, how we interpret intimacy, and how we understand one another. Most people feel the symptoms, the confusion, the anxiety, the mistrust, the craving for connection that never fully lands. In this video, we'll go through those mechanisms that are shaping this change beneath the surface. By the end of this video, you will not just understand the problem, you will see your past relationships differently. You will understand your present relationships with a new clarity. And you will know exactly which capacities modern relationships needs to thrive. So take a breath and settle in. Modern relationships don't drift apart because of a lack of love. They collapse because the shared meaning that once held two people together has now thinned out. Sociologists call these symbolic frameworks, the cultural stories that tell us what a relationship is for. For thousands of years, these frameworks were thick: family structures, religious narratives, community rituals. Today they have become fragile. And when meaning collapses, relationships lose their gravity. You can hear this collapse in the quiet confession of someone saying, "I don't know what we are anymore." That phrase is not about uncertainty, it's about the absence of an interpretative map. A couple might love each other, but without a shared story about what is the relationship and where it's headed, the connection becomes directionless. This is similar of what anthropology Victor Turner called liminality, a state where old meaning has dissolved but new meaning haven't been formed yet. People in relationships increasingly live in liminality, suspended between identities, unable to say who they are together. This is why the same conflict that would be considered normal 50 years ago now feel existential. When there is no shared meaning, every disagreement becomes a threat. Without a symbolic container, the relationships become psychologically unstable. In older cultures, relationships were shaped by constraints, social, economic, religious. But today constraints have been replaced for almost unlimited choice. Psychologist Barry Schwartz once described this as the paradox of choice. More options creates more anxiety, not more freedom. When applied to relationships, this inflation of choice changes how people evaluate a partner. Instead of asking, "Can we build something meaningful together?" people unconsciously ask, "Is there someone better out there?" This mindset creates what evolutionary psychologists call evaluation switching, where the brain is constantly scanning alternatives even when you are committed. It's not that the people are shallow, it's that the modern environment trains the mind to compare, assess, and optimize consciously. When someone sees a flaw in their partner, that flaw doesn't just appear as a human imperfection, it appears as a potential reason to leave. The psyche becomes then a marketplace. Imagine someone scrolling in dating profiles after a minor conflict with their partner. Not because they want to cheat, but because the culture has trained them to believe that there is always something optimal available. Comparison becomes addictive, and in this stage, maintaining loyalty requires a level of psychological maturity that most people were never thought to develop. Modern relationships are also failing because people carry attachment patterns that were never healed, but that are now amplified by digital overstimulation. Attachment theory, originally developed by John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth, describe internal working models, deep emotional templates that tell us whether others are safe, available, or trustworthy. These patterns used to unfold slowly, through real interactions. Today they are triggered instantly through text messages, social media, delayed replies, emojis, online visibility. So an anxiously attached person experiences silence as rejection, even when nothing is wrong, or an avoidantly attached person can feel suffocated even when the partner is just expressing affection. So, for example, if someone with an anxious pattern sees their partner active in social media but not responding their messages, their nervous system can interpret it as abandonment. Their heart rate raises, their mind catastrophizes, and they might instinctively protest. Meanwhile, someone with avoidance tendencies interprets emotional closeness as a loss of autonomy, and they pull away to regain a sense of control. These two patterns often collide, creating what psychologists call the insecure cycle, a predictable loop where each person's fears activates the others. This isn't necessarily immaturity. It's basic neurobiology, but now amplified by the constant overstimulation. Humans need rituals because rituals stabilize emotions and reinforce commitment. Anthropologists like Emily Durkheim and Victor Turner argue that the rituals are not decorative. They are psychological technologies for binding people together. Modern relationships have lost ritual structure, and without rituals, love becomes episodic, not anchored. A simply shared ritual like shared meals, evening walks, or spiritual practices acts as a stabilizing melody for the relationship. Without it, couples float in psychological noise. You can see this in couples who never develop routines. Every meeting has to be negotiated, every decision negotiated, every expression of love negotiated, and constant negotiation creates cognitive fatigue. Consider a couple who stopped having their weekly dinner because life became busy. Over time, they'll become disconnected, not because anything went wrong, but because the ritual that maintained the bonding has dissolved. They start to feel distant, confused, unsynchronized. Ritual absence creates emotional drift. So rituals are not habits. Habits automate behavior, but rituals generate meaning. Relationships collapses when meaning ceases to renew itself. Another reason why modern relationships fail is the rise of what I call performative intimacy. Social media subtly trains people to publicly display affection rather than cultivate depth properly. This is part of what sociologists call dramaturgical behavior, performing identity for an imagined audience. Instead of feeling connection, people feel pressure to appear connected. For example, someone might post a romantic photo, not to celebrate genuine closeness, but to reassure themselves that their relationship looks strong. This digital performance replaces the real emotional labor needed behind the scenes, creating what psychologists call emotional displacement, the illusion of connection without the substance. Couples begin to behave as if their public life is their relationship. But intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability cannot exist where performance is constant. So the relationship becomes a stage play, slowly losing its interiority. Modern culture romanticizes love while simultaneously weakening the psychological capacities needed for it. Many people unconsciously approach relationships with what developmental psychologists call infantilized expectations. They believe that love should soothe all wounds, eliminate conflict, and provide perpetual emotional security. Real relationships, however, require the ability to tolerate discomfort, navigate polarity, repair ruptures, and self-regulate. When people expect love to feel like perpetual ease, they interpret normal challenges as evidence of incompatibility. Consider someone who experienced their first conflict with their partner and interprets it as a sign that their relationship is doomed. They aren't dramatic, they've been conditioned. The cultural mythos of effortless soulmate love has replaced the older understanding that love is a practice, not experience. And love cannot survive when the psyche is brittle. Many modern relationships break down because individuals enter them with unintegrated trauma, emotional wounds that fragment the sense of self. Trauma creates fragmented identity structures, where different parts of the psyche hold contradictory fears and desires. A person may crave closeness, yet panic when they receive it. They might want commitment, yet sabotages. They may long for stability, yet be drawn to chaos. These are not contradictions. They are trauma residues, trying to protect the individual from the past pain. For example, someone who grew up with unpredictable caregivers might unconsciously recreate instability in adulthood, not because they want pain, but because instability feels familiar. Familiarity feels safe, even when it hurts. So they oscillate between pulling close and pushing away, projecting inner chaos onto their relationship. So unless individuals develop what trauma theorists call integration, the ability to unify fragmented emotional states, their relationships becomes a battlefield of internal conflicts played out externally. Modern culture pulls people out of their bodies and into their minds. Constant stimulation fragments attention, and fragmented attention fragments intimacy. Neuroscience refers to this as attentional diffusion, the inability to sustain deep presence because the mind is constantly switching context. Without presence, relationships degrade, eye contact shortens, appreciation becomes intermittent, conversations skim the surface, emotional cues go unnoticed, so couples begin to live beside each other instead of live with each other. Imagine partners sharing a meal while scrolling in their phones. It looks harmless, but psychologically it's so profound. The brain encodes relational bonding through micro interactions, glances, tone, timing, subtle gestures. When those disappear, the nervous system stops registering the relationship as alive. So presence is not a poetic idea. It's a neurological necessity for attachment. And finally, modern relationships fail because many people enter them seeking a sense of existential grounding that no partner can provide. Philosophers and spiritual psychologists call this the myth of immanent salvation, that belief that another person can resolve our existential incompleteness. When individuals lack spiritual grounding, whether religious, philosophical, or contemplative, they unconsciously turn their partner into a source of meaning. This creates a sacred burden that no human can bear. The partner becomes both idol when they meet expectations and enemy when they fail. For example, someone might feel an existential emptiness and assume that their relationship is missing something. They seek intensity, novelty, passion, but what they are truly lacking is a deeper orientation towards life itself. Their relationships collapses under the weight of metaphysical hunger. So in conclusion, modern relationships are failing not because people are bad at love, but because the surrounding psychological, cultural, technological, and spiritual environment is not designed to support deep connection. To build sustainable relationships today, individuals need a more mature understanding of love. one that integrates attachment healing, ritual structure, spiritual orientation, presence, emotional literacy, and a shared symbolic framework. The path is not to return to the past, but to recreate what the past has provided: stability, meaning, groundedness, and a shared story about why two lights belong together. Love survives when it is held by something larger than individuals' desires. It needs meaning, it needs structure, it needs ritual, and above all, it needs two people that understand that love is not a feeling, it's a spiritual and psychological practice.